It's Fanmail Friday, and you asked, what does a commitment to the young players look like? We're going to talk about that. It's time to get locked on with Mike and John, and this is Locked On Angels.
You are Locked On Angels, your daily Los Angeles Angels podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. You can find us anywhere you get your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and SiriusXM by searching Locked On Angels. And you can help out the show in a few ways. Leave us a rate and a review on Apple Podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that thumbs up button. And if you're not subscribed, please subscribe to Locked On Angels and become a Locked On everydayer. Whether you're watching or listening, come on over to YouTube. You can leave a comment. It's the best way to get in touch with us and be a part of the conversation.
Thanks for joining us for this Fanmail Friday edition of Locked On Angels, where it's your team every day. You've got the Frisch Brothers here with you, a.k.a. the Super Halo Bros. My name is John, and that's my brother Mike.
And my name is Mike, and that's my brother John.
Hey, we really appreciate all the questions we received for this week, and thanks for everybody who participated in our Angels roster report card this week as well. Very grateful for you. Makes what we do here a lot of fun, especially when we get your feedback and your insight. Mike, we've got some questions that I'm really excited to get to today, including some about Mike Trout, some about Rendon, some about coaching and management. And then this first voicemail that we have has to do with the young core that the Angels have. Let's get into that voicemail right now.
Hi, this is Ken. I'm from Houston, Texas, moved here from Southern California. What I want to see in 2024 is a commitment to our young talent. The continued development of that young talent, the continued development of their popularity with the fans. Everything needs to go towards them. We can't live in the past. We can't live on, what would have happened if Ohtani stays or doesn't stay. We can't live in that realm. We have to make a commitment to these young stars like Ohtani, Neto, Shonowell, Adele if he can come through, so on and so forth. Make it the team aspect and focus on that.
Hey, Ken in Houston, thank you for your voicemail. Really appreciate that. Calling from enemy territory, Mike, out there in Houston. So more power to you out there, Ken. He brings up a really interesting thought about making a commitment to the young talent on this team. Mike, I thought it was a good idea to maybe evaluate just kind of what we have in terms of the young players and some of the vets that are coming back. So if you consider who the Angels have, if you call up their young core, if you can call it that, position-wise, they have Mickey Moniak, Zach Neto, Nolan Shonowell, Logan O'Hoppe, Luis Rengifo, Joe Adell. So there's 6 guys right there. Starting pitching, they have Chase Silseth, Patrick Sandoval, Reed Detmers, and Griffin Canning. Then in terms of relief pitching, they've got Sam Bachman, Jose Soriano, and Ben Joyce. Mike, that's 13 of a 26-man roster who's here essentially for the long haul. They're signed for a good young while or a good long while, I should say. And even like Luis Rengifo, I know he's a free agent after 2026, 25. I think he's a free agent in 26, but he's also part of that young core. He's a young guy. I know he's been here since about 2019 actually. And all that to say, there's some good young talent there. Now, if you consider, again, that's 13 of 26 players. You think about the veterans and the position players we have in terms of veteran position players. You got to consider Mike Trout, Anthony Rendon, Brandon Drury, and then a backup catcher, somebody like Theis or Stassi or Wallach. I know Theis is not so much a veteran, but considering the young core versus, who's been here a while, I think he's part of that conversation. And then pitching wise, you have Carlos Estevez as the closer and Tyler Anderson also in the rotation. So adding all that up, you have 19 players, leaving you perhaps room for a starter, 1 to 2 bench pieces, and probably 4 to 5 more relievers. So if the Angels are going to make a commitment to the young guys in 2024, given, again, there's 13, half the roster is young guys, what does the commitment look like, Mike, to you?
I think there's layers to this. Obviously, we need a manager that is going to support these young guys. We need a pitching coach and a hitting coach that's going to really benefit these guys to their gifting and not what he thinks they need to do. And I think that there needs to be a great strategy behind how they're going to use these guys and the metrics behind them, all of that stuff. John, I think the biggest piece is that they give these kid times to develop. Like they give them the space to develop. And that means that they will probably need to sign some players to fill in the gap. What happened with Joe Adell last season is what some of these players might need. And that's what committing to the young core looks like. It's giving them the time to develop and not rushing them, not putting them in situations that they're not ready for. And I think that that's been the biggest struggle for somebody like Patrick Sandoval and a Reed Detmers and having some of the younger guys come up. Now, I'm not opposed to giving them a shot and letting the kids play, but I think that what we saw at the end of this season and in 2022 is an opportunity to let some of the kids play. And we found out some of those kids don't play. Like they're really, really good. And then some of those kids can't play and they need more time. And so I think a commitment to the young core is knowing that you don't have to rush this guy to the major leagues. I think about the shortstop that the Orioles drafted and how he is blocked right now on that Orioles roster, right? And he's tearing it up in the minor leagues, 19 years old, and has moved through the minor leagues really fast. But he's not on the major league roster yet. Why? Because they have a team filled with young stars and young players and good players and a mix of some veteran players. And so they can give him time to continue to marinate. And I think that that's been the biggest issue for the Angels and why some of these guys haven't really blossomed until later on. They just needed time. And so I would say the biggest commitment, it sounds weird, but they need time, even though we want to win and even though we want to see the Angels do well and get Mike Trout to playoffs, all that stuff. I think some of these young guys, they need some time to marinate and to develop before they're in the major leagues.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it that way because in my mind, I feel like if you let these guys do their thing in the major leagues, then and not have any expectations, not that you're going to be going to the World Series or whatnot. I think that the development can take place at the major league level without putting pressure and expectations on these guys. And then you surround them with the few pieces that you need. I think the Angels need a frontline starter, obviously. I think that they're going to try to be competitive, whether we like that or not. At the same time, I hope that there isn't anybody who comes on the team that takes away from opportunity that the young guys should be getting. I mean, at this point, there's not a lot left in terms of how much more AAA can you give like Joe Adell or somebody else that's a young piece here.
Sure.
Maybe some of the starting pitching could use a visit down to AA or AAA. Like Patrick Sandoval has time to get right. But I also think those things can take place in the majors. Again, if you don't have any expectations, you're letting these guys work these things out. And like you said, it all goes back to management and who's in charge of this team, who are the coaches at the major league level, really helping these guys take a step forward. I think that's a huge missing piece. And I also think it's good for them to be around guys like Mike Trout and even Tyler Anderson. I know he wasn't a great pitcher for us this season, but I think he brings a lot of experience to the table that these guys can really benefit from and learn from and sit at the fountain of knowledge, if you will. Hey, Mike, JJ Mailman on YouTube said, is it time to put Trout into a corner position, probably left, with Moniak being and hopefully staying here? So your thoughts on Mike Trout. Is it time to move him?
Well, first of all, nobody puts Baby in the corner and nobody puts Trout in the corner. But I do think that Trout might really benefit from moving to the corner. We're talking about like his body, talking about his legs, his calves, all of those things. But you've got some interesting thoughts here on Trout and what could possibly be a move or maybe not even be a move because he did have a pretty good defensive season in center field, right?
Oh, it was his best defensive season in center field that he's had in years, Mike.
Yeah.
It was actually really surprising to see that. In my opinion, I think he's found a solution to any back issues that he might have had. He said that he hired a team to help him prepare for the game and keep his back right and make sure that he's good to go and that his body is good. And I think eventually he'll move to a corner, but for 2024, it might not have to be that year. And when you consider what up the middle is, you have Logan O'Hoppe, you have Zach Neto and Drury up the middle, and then you have Trout up the middle, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't think that's a bad defense when you consider Trout in center field. Now, given the back and the calf issues that he's had, I think a corner move could be helpful. But again, I think Mike Trout found the answer to anything that's really kind of ailing him in terms of his body and whatnot. And the other issue is moving to a corner doesn't keep your hamate bone from breaking, right? Like that was going to happen. That was going to happen regardless of how many games he played or didn't play or where he's playing. And so really, I know that we're going to we're going to look at it from back here and be like, oh, Trout didn't play a lot last 3 years. But one of those 3 injuries was the hamate bone.
Right.
And again, that's not really anything you can do with strength and conditioning or where you play. I don't think that he's quite ready to move out of center field. I think he still really enjoys it. I'd actually like to see more of it, considering how great his season was this year while he was on the field. But it doesn't rule out the fact that, yes, eventually he will need to move to center field or out of center field and let somebody like a Moniak take over there. Hey, coming up on Locked On Angels, is Ohtani going to feel pressure to leave the Halos if people say that he wants to play for a winning team? And did you hear about the potential trade the Angels had on the table for Ohtani with the Rays? Well, we're going to get into all of that coming right up.
Locked On Angels is brought to you by Sleeper. You can swing for the fences on Sleeper picks, and you can win up to 100 times your money. All you have to do is choose 2 or more players that you like and decide if they're going to overperform or underperform in their stat categories. And if you get your picks right, then you can win big. And Sleeper works very quickly, too. Entries can be made in 30 seconds or less, and there are safe and fast withdrawals on all payouts. Download the Sleeper app today, and when you do, use our promo code LOCKEDON at sign-up, and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Check out Sleeper today.
Thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. Locked On Everydayers, join us on Monday as we discuss the benefit of 90 wins versus 100-win season. If that has any benefit to the playoffs, we actually have some good questions that we want to bring up, and we want to hear from you as well. So join us on Monday for that. We're really looking forward to it.
All right, Johnny, let's continue with Fanmail Friday. We have a voicemail from Tracy in Henderson.
Hey, guys, this is Tracy from Henderson, Nevada, an everydayer. And I'm calling in regards to Phil Nevin. First of all, I think Nevin needs another shot. I don't think he's been dealt a real good hand this year, something like 65 players going through the roster. I think what should happen is that Nevin should have full autonomy on hiring a staff. I agree that there's some coaches on there that should be let go. I know that a lot of blame is given to Nevin and the coaches for some of the pitching decisions and some of the strategies and so on and so forth. But if we're going to do that, I really think that we got to give him credit for the development of Schwanwell, of Neto, of Ohapi. You know, there's got to be some credit there somewhere. And then the other issue is in the dugout, the Angels really need some continuity. It just doesn't work changing managers every year or two. We haven't had that. But anyway, I appreciate what you guys do, and thanks for hanging in there the last couple of years.
Thank you, Tracy, for your voicemail and for appreciating what we do and hanging on with our Halos the way that we have. I mean, we're all doing it, right? We're all Angel fans hanging on with this team. Mike, I really love the questions. Tracy's called before he leaves us questions. He always has such thoughtful questions. You know, he's in the car, like thinking about this stuff. And then, then sends them our way. So really there's kind of 3 parts here, Mike. Number 1 is, did Phil Nevin get dealt a bad hand? If we blame Phil for coaching issues, does that mean that he's also responsible for the progress that the young guys have made? And I really think the last point, continuity in the dugout, is one to really consider as well. So as far as Phil Nevin not being dealt a good hand, I think that is actually pretty true, circumstantially and coincidentally. First is the 1-year deal. I mean, obviously that was due to Artie Moreno going to sell the team, and then he didn't. And so they were like, well, we got to give a managerial role to somebody, so let's give it to Phil. That doesn't instill any confidence in anybody. So, hey, we're giving you a 1-year deal, my friend. And I get it practically. I get it. I totally understand.
Yeah.
But I think that is part of not being dealt a good hand. The other part that Tracy mentioned was the injuries. And I mean, that's totally out of your control as a manager. I know that you have to manage how much playing time these guys get, but one of the things the Angels didn't have is a lot of flexibility. They had so many guys that they couldn't move between AAA and the majors or AA and the majors because they were out of moves. They were out of roster moves. So I think that really put a bind on this roster. And then the lack of autonomy in hiring his own coaching staff. Really only Marcus Timms was the guy that Phil Nevin got to bring in, and that's from their connection at the Yankees prior to Phil coming over to the Angels. Marcus Thames was with the Marlins. They were both with the Yankees. That's really the only choice that he had. Now, this question was interesting to me, and I'll let you respond. If we blame Phil and the coaching for the Angels' issues, should we give them credit for the development of guys like Neto and Ohtani and Shohei? What do you think?
Well, I think yes and no. I think both can be true, right? And I think that Phil had a great influence on this team in some ways. He seemed like he was really good at challenging the young guys. We talked about that moment with Suarez when he first took over for Joe Madden, and that's a good example of that. I think he always was emphasizing like preparedness and focus and them being young. Those are things I think that they really needed to work on. And it seemed like the players really liked him too. We did a whole show about Phil and what the players had said about him. And there was nothing that was like out of the ordinary when they said that. It was just things I think that you would say about anybody. And so I don't know if they necessarily liked him as a coach, but they liked him as a person for sure. Right. And so that came across really well. But also, Johnny, at the same time, we see Neto come up and we see Ohtani come over and they're both, tearing it up, and then they come up to the major leagues, and then we see Shohei doing the same thing. And I think, gosh, I think that this is really about MLB ready guys who showed up to the MLB and were ready, right?
Yeah.
That's my most profound thing I'm going to say on the show. And so did Phil have anything to do with that? I guess he put him in the lineup. That would be that would be my only thing. What are your thoughts?
I hear what you're saying. I mean, I think I agree with that too. My theory all along, and I actually ran this by Lindsey Crosby of Locked On MLB Prospects, and he was like, "Yeah, I don't think you're off the mark with this one." And it's that Perry got to the Angels, saw that there wasn't any player development happening, or saw the lack of resources that they have for player development, and both things again can be true. He got guys who were MLB ready from college. And I also think, and this is my theory, he looked around and saw how bad Angels player development systems were and went, I'm going to get guys who have it better in college and are prepared to play MLB because their colleges have better baseball programs than the Angels do in terms of development. And then Ohtani, obviously, coming over from the Phillies, I think that the Angels did kind of get some good things out of him, especially being in Double-A and whatnot. But I think you're right. I think both can be true. If Phil is going to get blamed for some stuff, I think he also is responsible for some good things, like the good influence he had on these guys. But at the same time, I think the guys Tracy mentioned were already kind of ready to go and didn't necessarily need Phil Nevin to teach them anything. Now, maybe he guided them along and helped them get ready, but I'm not sure that he taught them anything. But getting to the last point here, Mike, continuity in the dugout. I think I agree on this. I think you agree on that. The Angels go through a shuffle of GM, manager, GM, manager, GM, manager. For the last 5 years, they've gone through that. And it never really seemed like Phil Nevin was the guy. And so if you're going to have continuity in the dugout, I don't think it starts and ends with Phil Nevin. I think that he could have a job somewhere else, but really he's put in this position. I alluded to it earlier because the team was going to be sold. And I know Phil said that these guys come in and they're prepared to play every day and they do well and in their preparedness, but what does that preparedness look like? Because from all accounts, there's some indications that it might not have been enough. I mean, there was that comment from Dallas Braden where he really complimented all the other AL West teams on their preparation and didn't seem to mention the Angels in there anywhere. And again, if how this year shakes out, are they going to fall into the trap of a lack of continuity again? If they have Perry sign a guy, I mean, is this next manager going to get 3 to 5 years to see out what he can do and how he can transform this team? So again, I think it is Phil's fault, and in some areas it's not. And I think that's just kind of baseball at the end of the day.
I really think that the continuity question is a good question. However, this team is constantly transforming every single season. And so I think what you can see in baseball and in sports in general is that if you get the right guy in there, he can figure out how to use these guys to the best of their ability. And that is going to be the key for this next season. And these young guys, gosh, now's the time to just throw everything up in the air and put the pieces in place, because they really haven't had continuity because they've only been there for a year or less. Right. And they've went through AA to AAA to the major leagues, or they went from college to AA to the major leagues. And so I think that the continuity question for this particular team isn't as heavy as maybe it would be for teams in the past.
Well, and considering they've signed guys to 1-year deals for the last 4 or 5 years too, there's no continuity there.
Right.
So we're lucky that we have Drury and even Anderson for a couple of years here.
Yeah.
Hey, Roger Lord on YouTube said, I know this is a question you guys would like to avoid, but we need to address the elephant in the room. Oh, I'm ready. With Anthony Rendon's contract shaping to be the worst in franchise history and the inability to cut ties because he's owed so much money, how does Perry Minasian fit him into the organization's future? Roger says, here's my take on it. Perry needs to be up front, let him know that instead of being a whiner, a clubhouse downer, and an invisible presence, he has to make a complete 180 and take the opportunity to be a leader, a mentor, and a positive influence. So, Mike, how does Perry fit Rendon into the organization's future? Can he convince him to be a leader, a mentor, and a positive influence? How does Perry approach Rendon here?
I think you have to think about Rendon as, okay, he's going to be at third base next year. But I also think that you need to think about who else am I going to have at third base next year?
Oh yeah,
right.
Yeah.
It's going to be a both and you have to have somebody that can play every day, like a Gio Urshela, for example, that can play every day. So when Rendon inevitably gets hurt, then I think you're gonna have somebody that's gonna take his spot, and I think it's got to be somebody you can count on, not somebody who is. I love Moustakas, but I don't know if we can count on him. I love
not every day
those young guys, right? And so I think that they have to really be thoughtful about that. But this really is part of Perry's job to figure this out, is it not?
Oh, 100%. And also whatever next manager comes in as well. Going back to Nevin, I don't know that Rendon behaving the way he was is a very good reflection on Phil Nevin.
Right.
I think that like Rendon sounds like a bull in a china shop. You know what I'm saying? And I just don't know if that's a good reflection on him. The big question here is, Mike, how do you manage somebody who doesn't seem to care if he's going to play baseball or not? Because if he plays, fine. If he doesn't because he's hurt, he's fine with it. If you discipline him by not playing him, then he's fine with it. And if you DFA him, he gets to go home with his money or go to another team with his money. So it really doesn't make any difference to Rendon. So I think the question for Rendon needs to come from Perry, needs to come from the next manager, and it needs to come from Artie and John Carpino. Bite my tongue, but here's what the question is. Do you even want to be here?
Yeah.
And if not, what do we do about that? And the reason why I bring up Artie and John Carpino is because this involves money at the end of the day. And if it involves their money, then they're going to care about this conversation. So if you get the head honchos down to talk to Rendon, I think that you're going to get somewhere with him. But it really comes down to not just Perry, but I think ownership has to be involved in this conversation as well.
Locked On Angels is brought to you by FanDuel. October baseball is back. We love it. And you can make your postseason debut with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. FanDuel, you can join today, and you can start with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to create a new account, and then you can get in on all the action from the first pitch until the final out. You can bet on everything from strikeouts to home runs to who will win the game. And if you don't want to wait until the game is over to see who gets the W, you can predict what will happen in the next at bat with quick bets. And you can head over to FanDuel right now, FanDuel.com/lockedon, and step up to the plate this postseason. Again, $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you make your first $5 bet. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
All right, Mike, getting into our last segment, it really has everything to do with Shohei Ohtani. We got a couple of Ohtani questions here. In fact, we got a voicemail from our favorite chiropractor, Locked On Every Day, Scott Freeman out in Costa Mesa. Here we go to Scott's voicemail.
Hey, guys. How are you? Scott Freeman from Costa Mesa. I just saw the report from Bob Nightingale that Tampa offered Junior Caminero, who is, depending on the rankings, anywhere between the number 2 and the number 6 prospect in all of MLB, plus 2 additional prospects from their top 10 for Shohei. Wow. I know that there's the theory that we had to hold on to Shohei or he wouldn't even consider coming back. I know there's the theory that we were close to the playoffs and had to go for it. But I think this is a massive miscalculation. I think we're going to see more of these come out, and I think we need to talk about it. Thanks, guys.
Scott, thank you for your voicemail. What a great question. And
do we have to talk about it?
I know a concerning report here, right? I know Scott's like, we got to talk about it.
I love that.
Do we have to?
You crack my back while we talk about it.
Yeah, right. The report from Bob Nightingale, take it for what you will, but it was that the Rays offered Junior Caminero and 2 of their top 10 prospects for Ohtani. If that's true, if that's the case, it was reported by the Angels, or it was reported that the Angels said they weren't really blown away by any offers for Ohtani, but this one seems like an offer to be blown away by. Would you agree?
Right. I would have done this in a heartbeat. And I think what you just said there, I'm glad you clarified, because reported about the Angels and reported by the Angels are 2 different things, right? And about the Angels might have been, okay, I can maybe believe that, but if it was reported by the Angels, we weren't really blown away, I'm not really believing that.
No, 100%. Right? If this report's correct, then did the Angels miss their chance at getting a great offer? Did they do the right thing by trying to go all in? I have some thoughts, but why don't you start us?
Yeah, Johnny, I would have taken this offer, and in hindsight's 2020. But if this is who they were offering, gosh, man, I would have taken it, because that's Tampa Bay. It was Lindsey Crosby. Lindsey Crosby said, when Tampa calls, you listen, right? And so I guess the timing of it would have been important, because if Artie told Perry, go all in, I can understand why he did and didn't make the trade. But if that came before that, and they didn't make the trade, then I would be frustrated. But if it came after that and they decided to go all in and the owner said, then I'm not as frustrated, John, just because I at the time, it looked like they were making really good decisions to go all in, and everything just kind of fell apart after that. So I'm not frustrated if it came after that. I would be very frustrated if it came before that.
I think they did right by Ohtani to try to get the pieces they needed to compete. And they were 3 games behind the wild card spot, and then they were ahead of the Mariners in the division, and nobody out there could have predicted how badly August went, considering theoretically they added positive WAR players to their roster, and somehow still was awful. And yes, if the report's true, in hindsight, you said 2020, yes, that's awful. And would I like to have those pieces now? Of course.
Oh, gosh, heck yeah.
going into the deadline, I think I would have done that too. I think your best chance to win is with Shohei on the team, and the Angels were in striking distance. I know some people say, well, August was a tough schedule, but I mean, the Mariners got hot and the Rangers went ice cold. So you look at the way things shook out. I mean, weren't the Yankees in the 3rd wild card spot when the Angels were 3 games behind them? I mean, the Yankees didn't sniff the playoffs, just like we didn't sniff the playoffs. So anything could have happened, and that's just baseball. So again, yes, I think that I would have pulled the trigger on this, but at the same time, I think it said a lot to Ohtani that, hey, we're going for it. We're going to compete. We want you here, and we want to compete with you on this team.
Yeah. Johnny, last question from our friend Torred. He said, do you think Shohei may feel pressure to leave the Angels? That is, if he stays, many will say that he doesn't care about winning. What do you think?
Well, there's definitely going to be a lot of narratives around Shohei's decision, no matter if he stays or if he goes. But if he stays with the Angels, here's what you're going to hear. Let me just prepare everybody already, our Locked On Everydayers, everybody prepare for this. If he stays with the Angels, then they're going to say, Ohtani doesn't want to win. Ohtani wants to stay because he's comfortable and he's too comfortable there. They're going to say that he doesn't want to win because he doesn't want the pressure of a postseason appearance. And they're going to say about Ohtani, if he wanted to win, he would have signed to a perpetual playoff contender. And remember, Mike, those are all things that they said about Mike Trout in 2019 when he re-upped with the Angels. And you've said it before, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts, that if Shohei stays with the Angels, then the media are going to forget about him and drop him like a bad habit, just like they did with Mike Trout. Do you still think that's true?
Yeah, because he's not going to pitch. And in 2024, he's not going to pitch. And so he's not going to do Shohei things. He'll be great offensively, I think. He may not be as great because he's coming off the injury, but I think he'll probably have more doubles than home runs, but I think he won't be pitching. And so there won't be anything to talk about. And so I think that they're really going to ignore him and walk away from him. And fans are going to be mad at him. I think he'll be public enemy number 1 I love Shohei. I think people adore Shohei. I don't think it'll last very long, but I think that there will be a concerted effort from national media and from national baseball fans to say, oh, gosh, what did he do that for? And then move on. He doesn't want to win. And all of that stuff's going to go out there. That was my Colin Cowherd impression. But I think that that's what's going to happen, John. It'll be interesting to watch. And so I don't think, to answer the question, I don't think Shohei feels the pressure at all. Shohei's going to do Shohei things. Shohei's going to do whatever he wants to do, and he's going to make the decision that's best for him. And he's been very, very calculated in how he's talked about this team. For example, I can't wait to come back, and I can't wait to be ready at spring training, right? And everybody went, what does that mean? Ooh, what does that mean? And so I think that he's been very calculated in how he's talked about this. He's been very good at how he's approached this. And the narrative around all of the Shohei stuff has never come from him.
Yeah. And I think he couldn't care less what people think about him and his decisions. And because he's never cared. And he's never cared what people had to say about him. People doubted him when he got here. People doubted him when he had Tommy John the first time. Like, why would he listen to people who say stuff like that? Why would he listen to the same people who say stuff about Mike Trout? And again, if he signs to the Angels, of course, all of that narrative is going to be out there. And you're right. People are going to turn a blind eye to anything he does after that, especially because he won't pitch next year. And even when he does begin to pitch again, I'll be interested to see how the media reacts to him if he decides to stay with the Angels, because again, they went ice cold on Mike Trout until this season when the speculation of should the Angels trade Trout, that came up again. So again, he's going to get the Trout treatment if he decides to stay with the Angels.
Hey, thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. Remember, everydayers, we're here Monday through Friday, 5 days a week with all your content. It is the off season, but we still have a lot of things to talk about. So you can talk about it right here, and you can reach out to us. John, tell them how they can do that.
Yeah, you can reach out to us at Locked On Angels on Twitter and at Super Halo Bros on Twitter and Instagram. The best way you can reach us too is getting into our YouTube comments. So if you're in the audio side, the video side, come on over to YouTube, get in our comments. We'll do our best to get back to you. Mike, what do we have on deck for tomorrow's show?
We're going to share why the Halos need 90 wins, not just to make the playoffs, but to make an impact in the playoffs. We're going to talk about all the details on Monday on Locked On Angels.
Looking forward to that conversation. We hope you'll come back and join us again. All right, friends, have a great weekend. In the meantime, my name is John, and that's my brother Mike.
And my name is Mike, and that's my brother John.
Thanks for being here with us, and we'll see you back here on Monday.
Call it.
Guy who said you could trade draft picks in MLB.
Pay attention, doofus.